Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, Story 4.
Imagine, just for a second, discovering that the price of your next major career promotion, or your ultimate financial freedom, required the violent death of an innocent stranger.
Wow, yeah, that is quite the hypothetical.
Right, and you are you're the only one who actually knows it's going to happen.
That is heavy.
It is. And the question is, would you take that deal? Could you just stand by and watch it happen?
I mean, most people would like to think they wouldn't.
Exactly. But in 17th century China, one author used what looks like this simple campfire ghost story to ask exactly that question.
And the answer he arrived at is just fascinating.
It really is. It forces us to completely reevaluate what we think we know about loyalty and morality and, the actual systems we use to survive.
It's a profound hypothetical that completely strips away the polite fictions of society, I think. We like to think of morality as this clean, universal, absolute.
Oh, for sure. Black and white.
Right, but when survival is actually on the line, the text we are examining today suggests that ethical choices are incredibly messy. I mean, really messy.
Yeah, and that is the incredibly high-stakes scenario we are exploring in today.
It takes a seemingly mundane scenario like two individuals just sharing a drink and elevates it to something with universe-altering stakes.
It forces us to ask what it truly costs to elevate oneself in a rigid system. And we have an absolutely mesmerizing narrative in front of us today to help us do that.
Yes, pulled from a monumental collection of Chinese literature.
Exactly. It's called Liulang, which usually translates to Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio.
Such a classic.
It really is. And the specific text we are dissecting is the story of a character named Wang Liulang.
Right.
Now, on the surface, the source material basically outlines this really unlikely, almost spooky bond between a humble, living fisherman named Zhu and a drowned spirit.
A classic ghost setup, really.
Yeah. But our mission is to look way past the supernatural trappings.
Yeah, what the author Pu Songling is doing here is embarking on a profound exploration of systemic injustice.
Right. We are going to look very closely at the chilling concept of the substitute in the afterlife.
And by understanding the mechanics of that spiritual bureaucracy, we will uncover a deeply cynical yet ultimately hopeful social critique.
Which is so interesting. The ghosts and the gods are just the mechanisms.
Exactly. The real focus, the real haunting, is the condition of the human heart when it is given power over another life.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand this, we have to start at the muddy banks of a river.
Right, in the northern suburbs of Zibo.
Yes, Zibo. This is where we meet our human protagonist, the fisherman Zhu.
Zibo, historically, is an area rich in culture, but also highly defined by the harsh realities of agricultural and river-based labor.
Yeah, it's not an easy life. Zhu is a fisherman by trade, living completely day to day.
Very hand-to-mouth.
Exactly. But he has this incredibly unique, almost melancholic nightly habit.
It's a fascinating routine.
It really is. Every single night, he takes a jug of wine down to the riverbank. He drinks, he sets up his fishing gear, but, and this is the key, he intentionally doesn't keep all the wine for himself.
Which, wine isn't cheap for a struggling fisherman.
No, not at all. Before he even takes a sip, he pours a libation directly onto the earth.
And he recites a very specific prayer, right?
Yes, he says, "May the drowned ghosts in the river get to drink."
We really need to examine the mechanics of that specific action.
Please do, because it seems so odd to just pour good wine in the mud.
Well, it is not merely a generalized toast to the departed. In the context of Chinese folk religion and the cosmology of the time, the drowned ghost occupies a uniquely tragic space.
Like, worse than a normal ghost.
Much worse. Water is often viewed as a boundary, right? A liminal space that literally traps those who perish within it.
Oh, wow, so they are stuck there.
Exactly. A drowned soul was considered stuck, unable to easily transition to the afterlife or receive normal ancestral offerings.
So they're just completely cut off.
Cut off, cold forgotten, and starving in a spiritual sense.
That's so bleak.
It is. So when Zhu pours that wine onto the earth being the medium that bridges the physical and spiritual realms, he is performing a hyper-specific act of nourishment.
He's targeting the most marginalized entities in his unseen environment.
Exactly.
So it's basically this structural empathy. He's just saying cheers to a memory,
Right. He is actively trying to alleviate a very specific type of invisible suffering.
And he does this as a matter of strict routine. It's not some holiday ritual. It's his constant practice.
Every single night.
And what's fascinating is that the text tells us there is an immediate supernatural return on this investment.
Which he doesn't even realize at first.
Right. While the other fishermen on that exact same stretch of river catch absolutely nothing, Zhu always manages to fill his basket.
His empathy is literally paying off in fish.
It is. But the narrative really kicks into gear on one specific night.
The night everything changes.
Yeah, so Zhu is sitting there, going through his routine, drinking alone.
As usual.
As usual, when suddenly a young man simply materializes and starts pacing back and forth nearby.
Just out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. And Zhu, being the kind of guy who already shares his drink with the invisible, invites the young man over.
He willingly shares his wine face to face.
Yeah, which is so generous.
Notice how the dynamic fundamentally shifts the moment the unseen becomes seen.
How so?
Well, prior to this night, Shu's relationship with the spirit world was entirely abstract. It was an offering sent into the void and a blessing received from the void.
Right, a very safe, distant kind of magic.
Exactly. But when they sit down and share the physical space, when they pass the cup back and forth, the relationship becomes grounded in mortal hospitality.
And the immediate result of this social connection is kind of hilarious. Zhu fishes all night and catches absolutely nothing.
Zero fish.
Zero. I was completely hung up on that detail in the source material.
It's a great detail.
I mean, if this young man, who we eventually learn is the spirit driving the fish to Zhu, has been helping him all along from the shadows, why does Zhu catch zero fish the moment they're actually hanging out together?
It highlights a very human limitation placed upon the supernatural.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when the spirit was operating from afar, he was performing a distant labor, but when he is invited to the table, he is distracted by the companionship.
Oh, he's literally just having too much fun talking.
Exactly. The warmth of human interaction arrests his supernatural duties. He isn't working. He is socializing.
That makes so much sense. So it actually requires the young man to physically break from the conversation.
Right. He has to explicitly state, let me go downstream and drive them to you, and actively enter the water.
So it transitions from a passive blessing to a conscious physical act of labor.
To repay the hospitality he just consumed.
It transitions from a cosmic reward to an active partnership. It's like if you had a mysterious benefactor secretly paying your rent for months.
Okay, I like this analogy.
But then you finally meet them for coffee, and while you're chatting, your landlord knocks on the door demanding the check.
Right.
The benefactor has to actually stop drinking their coffee, pull out their wallet, and hand over the cash in real time.
It perfectly demystifies the magic and makes it a tangible transaction.
And that's a highly effective one, too, because the young man's intervention downstream results in an absolutely massive catch of foot-long fish.
A ridiculous amount of fish.
Yeah. And when Zhu tries to give him some of the fish as a thank you, the young man completely refuses.
He states the wine was payment enough.
Right. And then he introduces himself simply as Wang Liulang.
Which is a brilliant character detail by the author.
Really? Why is that?
Well, Wang Liulang translates roughly to Wang the Sixth Son. It is a profoundly common, completely unpretentious name.
Okay, so he's not royalty or anything.
Not at all. He explicitly states he has no formal style name, which in Qing Dynasty society immediately marks him as a commoner.
So he's someone without high literary or social status.
Precisely. Even in death, he retains his humble class identity.
That's fascinating. The transaction here begins as this supernatural barter system wine for fish, but it is fundamentally rooted in mutual respect.
Between two common laborers, yes.
Right. Zhu pours the wine out of genuine empathy for the forgotten, and Wang Liulang drives the fish out of genuine gratitude for being remembered.
It's a perfectly balanced symbiotic arrangement.
And the text notes that this arrangement goes on for half a year.
6 whole months.
Yeah, 6 months of quiet nightly companionship by the river. They become these inter-realm confidants.
It's this beautiful, isolated pocket of friendship.
It really is, until suddenly a tearful confession completely shatters the peace.
The narrative pivot here introduces the core conflict of the text.
Yeah, it gets dark fast. After 6 months, Wang approaches Zhu and tearfully bids him farewell.
He finally strips away the mystery.
He does. He reveals his true identity, basically stating, I am a ghost. I drowned in this river years ago.
And he confirms he is the one who's been driving the fish to repay the libations.
But the tragedy isn't his death, right?
No, the tragedy is the condition of his potential rebirth.
Right. He drops an absolute bombshell about the mechanics of the afterlife.
She really does.
Wang explains that his term of serving as a drowned ghost is finally complete. But here's the horrifying catch.
And it is horrifying.
In order for him to be reincarnated, to escape the freezing, eternal current of the river, a substitute must take his place.
We really have to unpack this concept because it is the engine of the entire moral dilemma.
Please do, because it sounds awful.
It is deeply entrenched in folklore. This is the concept of the dia, or the substitute.
Okay.
To understand the horror of this, you have to understand how the Chinese folk afterlife is actually structured.
It's not just clouds and harps.
Not at all. It is not an ethereal realm of immediate moral judgment where the good go to clouds and the bad burn.
So what is it?
The afterlife is a rigid, unforgiving bureaucracy. It directly mirrors the sprawling, complex, imperial civil service system of the earthly empire.
Oh my God.
Yes. There are magistrates of the underworld, quotas, paperwork, and strict karmic ledgers.
So it's literally a spiritual DMV, but with your soul on the line?
In many ways, yes, that is exactly what it is.
That sounds like actual hell.
And for a drowned ghost, the bureaucratic rule is that your specific position in the river cannot be left vacant.
Wait, what? So there's a quota for dead people in the river?
Exactly. Salvation requires the suffering of another. It is a zero-sum game of spiritual survival.
That's so messed up.
You can only rise if you pull someone else down into the water to take your place in the dark.
It is an institutionally mandated cycle of violence.
Precisely.
It is a cosmically sanctioned Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
You can only cash out of your miserable existence if you recruit a new victim to take the fall.
It's incredibly dark because it's not some evil demon demanding this.
Right, it's just the law of the universe.
It is just the paperwork of the cosmos.
And Wang doesn't just say, someday a substitute will come. Because of his connection to the spiritual bureaucracy, he has insider information.
He knows exactly what is going to happen.
He tells you exactly when and who the victim will be. He says, tomorrow at noon, a woman is going to cross the river and she will drown. She is my substitute.
If we look closely at Wang's psychological state in this moment, the burden is just unimaginable.
I can't even imagine.
For years, he has existed in the freezing, liminal space of the river, just waiting for a victim. That was his only hope for escape.
His only ticket out.
But over the last 6 months, through his interactions with Xu, he has experienced warmth and generosity and genuine friendship.
He has been rehumanized.
Exactly. And now, precisely when he feels the most connected to the human experience, he is on the precipice of buying his freedom with the violent death of an innocent human being.
He's essentially telling his best friend, tomorrow I'm going to allow the universe to murder a woman on my behalf so I can finally move on.
And he's crying about it. It's not malicious.
No, he isn't twirling a mustache and laughing.
Not at all. He is just trapped by the inescapable law of the bureaucracy he inhabits.
Which brings up the agonizing question of what survival costs in a broken system.
Right. The system demands a life. Wang is a prisoner to the rules of this spiritual architecture.
And this knowledge puts our living fisherman Zhu in an absolutely impossible position.
It really does.
Knowing a woman is destined to die the very next day, what does he do?
This is where we move right into what we can only describe as a 17th century trolley problem on the riverbank.
It really is. It is the ultimate test of moral philosophy, played out in the mud and the reeds.
Let's look at how it plays out.
So the text tells us that the next day, Zhu goes down to the river. He doesn't go to fish. He just goes to watch.
He is waiting for noon.
Put yourself on that riverbank for a second. You're hiding in the grass, knowing a cosmic execution is scheduled.
The tension must have been unbearable.
And sure enough, a woman approaches, and she is carrying a baby.
The stakes just got infinitely higher.
Right. As she tries to cross the water, she slips and falls into the rushing river.
A complete accident.
But in that split second of falling, she manages to toss her baby safely onto the bank.
Incredible reflexes.
So now the baby is just screaming on the shore, and the woman is violently struggling in the water. She sinks, she floats up, she sinks again.
It is a visceral, terrifying scene.
And she is standing right there, just watching a mother drown.
Yes. He does nothing.
But against all odds, the woman miraculously manages to fight the current, climb out of the river, pull herself onto the bank, rest for a moment, grab her crying baby, and walk away.
She actually survives.
She does. Now here's where the source text does something brilliant.
It really is brilliant.
It gives us access to Zhu's internal monologue. He admits to himself that he desperately wanted to save her.
But he stopped himself.
Yes. He deliberately held back and chose to do absolutely nothing because he knew she was the designated substitute for his friend Wang.
His loyalty paralyzes his morality.
And when she actually survives and walks away, she was just confused. He assumes Wang's supernatural prediction was flawed.
This is a critical juncture for both characters, and we really need to examine their choices deeply here.
Definitely. Let's look at Wang's choice first.
Right, because when Wang returns that night, still a ghost, he explains to Zhu exactly why the woman lived.
It wasn't a glitch in his foresight.
No, Wang actively chose to let her go.
Wow.
He tells you that as he watched her drown, he looked at the baby crying on the shore and felt profound pity.
He couldn't do it.
He realized that taking the mother would mean destroying 2 lives to save his own, because the infant would surely perish without its mother.
Oh, that makes sense. A baby left alone on a riverbank wouldn't last long.
Exactly. So Wang voluntarily gave up his one guaranteed chance at reincarnation.
He intentionally condemns himself to stay in a freezing hell so a stranger can live.
It's an act of staggering self-sacrifice.
It really is. But let's talk about the fisherman for a second here.
Okay, let's talk about Zhu.
Because, frankly, Zhu comes off looking pretty terrible here.
I can see why you'd say that.
He literally stands by and watches a struggling mother drown. Or at least he attempts to watch her drown until she saves herself.
Right.
And he does this just so his ethereal confidant can get a promotion out of the river.
It sounds bad when you put it like that.
Isn't Yu entirely morally compromised here?
Yeah.
By any modern standard, he is an accomplice to attempted murder by negligence.
If we judge him strictly by 21st century utilitarianism, absolutely. He fails the test.
Deservedly.
But we cannot apply modern generalized altruism to a Qing dynasty text without losing all the nuance.
Okay, fair. So what is the historical context I'm missing?
We have to look at the Confucian hierarchy of obligations that defined Zhu's worldview.
The hierarchy of obligations.
Okay. Right. In ancient Chinese philosophy, there was a competing school of thought called Mohism.
Mohism.
Yes, Mohism advocated for universal love, the idea that you should care for a stranger as much as your own family.
Well, that sounds nice.
It does, but Mohism lost out to Confucianism historically.
Oh, okay.
Under the Confucian framework, your moral duties are not equal across humanity. They are basically concentric circles radiating outward.
Like a bullseye?
Exactly. Your highest duty is to your family at the center, then your immediate friends and community, and the weakest obligation is to the unknown stranger on the outer rings.
Ah, okay, so you're saying that from Zhu's perspective, saving the stranger at the expense of his closest friend would actually be the moral violation.
Within his specific cultural and ethical framework, yes.
That is wild to think about.
He is defaulting to a tribal loyalty. He is prioritizing his inner circle. Wang, despite being a ghost, is his companion. The woman is entirely outside the circle.
So Zhu's inaction, while horrifying to us, is actually a reflection of intense, albeit localized, loyalty.
Precisely. However, what makes the story a masterpiece is that the author uses localized loyalty to highlight Wang's transcendent morality.
Wait, expand on that.
Wang, a creature who is legally dead and severed from human society, chooses the universal good over his own desperate self-interest.
Oh, wow.
He acts with the universal love of a mohist, rejecting the tribalism of the living.
That completely changes the read on the scene. The ghost acts more human than the human.
Exactly. And Hughes realizes his own moral smallness in the face of Wang's greatness.
He does. Because when Wang explains what he did, Zhu is deeply humbled.
As he should be.
He tells Wang that his benevolent heart can reach the Supreme Emperor, which is basically a reference to heaven itself.
It is the moment Zhu recognizes true virtue.
Because Zhu thought he was a generous man just because he poured out a cup of cheap wine on the dirt.
Right. But Wang poured out his entire eternity.
But according to the rules of the death bureaucracy, Wang missed his window.
He let the substitute go.
Which means he is stuck in that river forever.
Or so he thinks.
Right, because the narrative refuses to end in tragedy. It pivots sharply here, moving from profound sacrifice to cosmic reward.
Because the underlying thesis of the text is that true selfless morality must inevitably disrupt rigid, uncaring systems.
Yes, exactly. So days later, Wang returns to you to say goodbye yet again.
He tells you he hasn't found a new substitute.
But instead, his act of immense self-sacrificing compassion completely bypassed the local bureaucracy and reached the years of heaven.
Because he spared the mother and child, the supreme cosmic authority has intervened.
As a reward, Wang has been officially appointed as the Earth God.
Or the Tootie.
The Tootie of Wutown in Zaoyuan County.
We need to define what a Tootie is to really grasp the magnitude of this promotion.
Please do, because I hear Earth God and I think, like Zeus.
Right, no, an earth god is not an omnipotent supreme creator deity. Think of a Tootie as a localized celestial bureaucrat.
Okay, so sticking with the DMV analogy.
Exactly. They are essentially the supernatural mayor or zoning commissioner of a specific village or town.
A zoning committee.
Yes. They manage the immediate spiritual and physical well-being of that localized area,
So what does that entail?
ensuring good harvests, protecting against minor demons, and basically recording the deeds of the villagers. It is a position of deep respect and tangible power within the community.
So it's not just that he escaped the river. He was literally given a governorship.
Precisely.
His system demanded a substitute. It demanded blood. That was the mechanical rule of the afterlife.
Right.
But heaven intervened because Wang's empathy created this ethical force that shattered the mechanics of that system.
It's an excellent way to conceptualize it. If we look at the bureaucratic rules as a kind of gravity,
Oh, wait, listen.
a force designed to pull souls down and keep the system functioning,
Right.
well, Wang's act of self-sacrifice created so much ethical velocity that he didn't just escape the gravitational pull of the river.
He was launched into orbit,
He stepped entirely outside the rigid structure of his expected role.
and the universe responded by elevating him far beyond what the normal bureaucratic path could have ever offered.
It's a beautiful subversion of the rules.
It really is. And what's beautiful is that with this new elevation, Wang doesn't forget his roots.
He doesn't forget his drinking buddy.
He invites his mortal friend. He tells you to pack up and come visit him in Wu Town, assuring him not to fear the long, arduous journey.
But this introduces a new conflict.
It does, because earthly logic immediately clashes with spiritual reality.
Right.
When Zhu excitedly tells his wife he's going to pack his bags and travel hundreds of miles across the province to visit his drinking buddy, who is now a literal god, she is not having it.
Not at all.
She flat out mocks him. She laughs at the absurdity of traveling all that way just to talk to a, quote, clay statue.
The wife's role here, though brief, is structurally vital.
How so?
She is the anchor of mundane, earthly logic. If you strip away the listener's omniscience and look at this from a purely pragmatic perspective, her reaction is the only sane one.
Yeah.
Her husband, a poor fisherman, wants to abandon his livelihood, spend resources they likely don't have, and travel for days on foot.
Just to go speak to a piece of painted clay in a rural shrine.
In the cold light of day, it sounds like absolute madness.
It sounds completely unhinged. If your partner told you they were going on a cross-country road trip to commune with a lawn ornament they claim is their old roommate.
You'd be looking for a therapist.
Instantly. But her mockery serves to perfectly contrast with Xu's blind, unwavering faith.
Yeah, because he knows what he experienced.
He knows what happened in the dark by the river. He knows the character of Wang Liulang.
This forces the listener to confront the nature of belief and loyalty.
Zhu is entirely willing to look foolish in the eyes of the pragmatic world.
Because his loyalty to his friends supersedes societal logic.
The pragmatic world, represented by his wife, sees a clay statue. But Zhu sees the benevolent heart that spared a mother and child.
It's a profound level of trust.
So, defying all earthly logic, Zhu ignores his wife's laughter. He packs his bags, gathers his meager funds, and heads east to Zhaoyuan County.
Which brings us to a fascinating collision.
A mortal stepping into the domain of a newly minted god. How do the rules of their friendship survive that massive power imbalance?
It requires an incredibly delicate transition of power and status, and the author navigates it brilliantly.
Because when Zhu finally arrives in Wu Town, the reality of Wang's new divine status becomes immediately, overwhelmingly apparent.
It's a very surreal sequence.
It is. Zhu walks into the local inn at Wu Town, dusty and tired from the road. Before he can even introduce himself, the innkeeper's eyes go wide.
He recognizes him immediately.
He asks, "Are you Zhu from Zibo?" And Zhu is just stunned. He's hundreds of miles from home. How could they possibly know him?
And the innkeeper's explanation is wild.
He explains that the entire village just had a shared dream.
A collective vision.
Yes. Their new god, Wang, came to them in their sleep, announced that his dear mortal friend Zhu was arriving, and explicitly instructed the villagers to help Zhu with his travel expenses and host him.
Notice the profound shift in the power dynamic here.
It's a huge shift.
Wang is no longer a shivering, naked ghost relying on a fisherman for a few drops of wine.
No, he is a recognized deity.
He commands the respect, the dreams, and the economic resources of an entire town. But crucially, how does he wield this newly acquired power?
That's the key.
Yes. He doesn't demand monuments. He uses his divine influence to ensure his vulnerable human friend is welcomed, protected, and financially cared for.
He basically leverages his divinity for hospitality.
Exactly.
So Zhu goes to the local shrine to pay his respects. He brings what he has always brought, wine.
A callback to the riverbank.
He sacrifices the wine, pouring it out just like the old days, and he speaks to the invisible Wang.
And the text provides this wonderfully visceral sensory detail here.
As Yu speaks, a sudden whirlwind rises from right behind the shrine's seat.
It doesn't just blow past either.
No, it spins and whirls around for a long time, lingering in the room before finally dissipating.
The whirlwind is a vital symbol in Chinese folklore.
Really? What does it signify here?
It serves as a tangible, physical manifestation of the invisible god's emotion. It is Wang's joy, his relief, and his presence breaking through the barrier between the divine and mortal realms.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because he is now a god, he cannot simply manifest and chat over a drink in the waking world anymore.
Right.
So he communicates his affection through the elements. It is the environment itself reacting to their reunion.
It's basically his way of reaching out and giving his friend an elemental hug.
An elemental hug, I like that.
And that night, Wang does finally appear to Zhu, but only in the safety of a dream.
The visual contrast in the dream is striking.
Wang is dressed beautifully in official, bureaucratic robes now. It's a stark departure from the ragged, drowned commoner he once was.
He's fully integrated into the celestial system.
And he thanks Yu deeply for making the long journey. But he explains a heartbreaking new reality.
Yes, the rules have changed.
As a newly appointed god, he cannot casually meet with a mortal face-to-face in the waking world anymore. The cosmic rules just won't allow it. He promises that the villagers will give Zhu gifts to repay his past kindness, and the two friends share a tearful goodbye in the dreamscape.
This interaction is heavily layered and requires careful unpacking.
I agree, because to a modern listener, this might sound a bit, convenient.
Convenient how?
Is Wang just giving Zhu the brush off? I mean, is this the classic, hey man, I got a massive promotion, I'm in the C-suite now, I don't really have time to hang out with the mailroom guys anymore routine?
I can see how you'd think that.
Right. Or is there a functional protective reason he can't see Zhu?
It is definitively the latter, and to read it as a brush-off is to project modern corporate cynicism onto ancient cosmology.
Okay, fair enough. Let's hear the cosmological reason.
In the context of this mythology, a mortal directly encountering the unshielded presence of a deity in the waking world is inherently dangerous.
Like, physically dangerous.
Sometimes even fatal. The energy disparity is just too great. Wang is maintaining the necessary cosmic order.
So he's protecting him.
Furthermore, it is a sign of profound respect. He is acknowledging that their previous dynamic equals, sharing a jug of wine, is simply no longer possible.
Right, you can't be drinking buddies with a god.
Exactly. But rather than abandon the friendship, he transforms it.
He uses his new congregation to shower Zhu with hospitality.
And financial security he can no longer provide personally by driving fish into a net. He is fulfilling his obligations as a friend through the mechanism of his new capacity as a god.
That makes a lot of sense. He can't safely drink with him on the riverbank, but he can ensure Zhu never has to worry about money or hunger again.
Exactly.
And that leads us to the departure, because it's finally time for Zhu to return home to Zibo.
But the village of Wutown and their god are not going to let him just slip out the back door quietly.
No, they are not. The departure is staged as a grand communal affair.
Orchestrated by the divine will of Wang.
And eagerly enacted by the villagers who revere him. Zhu tries to leave, but the villagers literally beg him to stay.
They host banquets for him every single day.
When he finally insists that he absolutely must return to his life, they shower him with gifts. They basically fill his bags with wealth.
And the entire village comes out to the edge of town to see him off.
It's quite a scene. And as he walks away down the road, suddenly a sheep's horn wind appears.
Which is the historical term for a dust devil or a tightly coiled, localized whirlwind.
Right. And it doesn't just spin in place. It actively follows you down the road for over 10 miles.
Over 10 miles. Once again, we see the natural world reflecting supernatural devotion.
The whirlwind is Wang.
Exactly. Unable to walk beside his friend in human form, he chooses instead to escort him as the wind.
It's the ultimate divine escort. Finally, after 10 miles of this trailing whirlwind, Zhu stops.
He turns around.
He turns, he bows deeply to the spinning wind, and he tells Wang to go back.
He tells his friend to focus on being a good god to his people.
And that he doesn't need to worry about his old fishing buddy anymore. The wind circles him affectionately one last time, like an unspoken farewell, and then dissipates.
It's very poignant.
Shu returns home to Zibo, becomes wealthy from the villagers' gifts, and is able to stop his grueling labor as a fisherman.
And he hears for years that Wang is a highly responsive, fiercely protective, and beloved god in Ziyuan.
It's a beautifully neat, harmonious ending to their narrative.
It is a very satisfying conclusion to the plot, but the author, Pu Songling, isn't quite finished with us.
No, he is not. He attaches an explicit author's note at the very end of the tale.
Adopting his famous persona of the historian of the strange.
And to understand the absolute venom in this final note, we have to briefly understand who Pu Songling was, right?
Yes, because the tone shifts dramatically here.
Please explain the background.
Pu Songling was a brilliant scholar who spent his entire life repeatedly failing the upper levels of the imperial civil service examinations.
Ouch.
He was trapped in a state of perpetual academic and bureaucratic limbo, just watching men of lesser intellect but greater wealth or connections get promoted to high offices.
So he was incredibly bitter.
Extremely. His entire life was defined by the crushing weight of a rigid, unfair system.
That explains so much.
So when he writes a story about a humble ghost who bypasses the celestial bureaucracy through pure merit and empathy, it is absolute wish fulfillment.
And when he writes the moral of the story, it is directed squarely at the corrupt elites of his day.
This is where the gloves come off.
They really do. The author explicitly states the moral. Wang achieved godhood specifically because he did not forget his poor, humble friend, even after he reached a status of immense power.
He then draws a direct, sharp, and highly critical contrast
between this benevolent drowned ghost and the modern elites of his own society.
He paints a very specific cultural picture here.
Walk us through it.
He contrasts Wang, the newly minted god, with a modern elite riding in an opulent carriage. This elite deliberately averts his eyes and ignores the man in the bamboo hat.
The bamboo hat being a symbol.
Yes, a universal shorthand for a poor, laboring friend from the elite's past. The ghost remembers the fisherman, but the rich man pretends he doesn't know the peasant he grew up with.
To really hammer this point home, the author shares a purportedly true, real-world anecdote.
A very depressing anecdote.
He tells a story about a very poor man who traveled 1,000 miles, much like Shu did, to visit a childhood friend who had recently been appointed to a rich, powerful government post.
The poor man assumed his old friend would welcome him, right?
Right. He thought he'd get a position, exactly as Wang helped Shu.
But the reality of human nature, corrupted by the earthly bureaucracy, is much uglier than the spirit world.
The rich, powerful friend coldly rejects him.
He offers no help, no position, and barely any hospitality.
The poor man is utterly humiliated. He is left so destitute by the journey that he's actually forced to sell his own horse just to afford the journey back home.
And to add insult to absolute injury, the author notes that a relative of the poor man wrote a mocking poem about the ordeal.
The dark humor in this poem is devastating.
It really is.
The poem jokes about the man's mink hat falling off, his grand umbrella failing to open, and his noble horse magically turning into a donkey for the humiliating ride home.
It is a profound, cynical humiliation. The poem is literally laughing at the poor man for being naive enough to believe that wealth and power wouldn't rot his friend's loyalty.
So, if we synthesize Pu Songling's direct social commentary here, the entire supernatural tale of Wang Liulang is revealed to be a mirror.
The ghost, the literal monster of folklore, the entity that is supposed to be terrifying and selfish, represents the ideal human behavior.
He is loyal, empathetic, and capable of supreme self-sacrifice.
While the actual human beings, the rich elites in their carriages, the magistrates, are the real monsters.
They are cold, highly transactional, and completely devoid of basic empathy.
It is such a powerful, total inversion of expectations.
It makes Yu's blind faith in a ghost's loyalty seem completely rational and sane, because placing that exact same faith in a living human being would leave you selling your horse to buy a donkey.
The author is essentially screaming that the ghost is the only one you can trust.